Oh yeah, as I was saying before, this is a garment that I maybe cut out about 3 years ago for nobody. I tried it on my 4-year-old granddaughter and she absolutely loves it, so I suppose she'll eventually end up with it. So what I've done here is I've just added a little feature by putting fabric as a cuff, and these pockets are half the size of the other one because I decided to make it into a jacket. Now the whole thing's been made on a sewing machine, so there's no overlocking at all, but I have put the ribbing on and I do want to overlock the ribbing. So if you don't have a sewing overlocker, you do have overlock stitch, 2 overlock stitches on your sewing machine. So I'm going to show you the single overlock stitch. Now you might wonder why I have put my ribbing not going to the end of my garment here. The reason being, I am going to be putting a zip up here and I want the zip to be sewn onto the fabric and then folded down and then top stitched, and then that will bring it in, or else it would have made that too thick. So there is method to my madness. So the next thing I'm ready to do on this garment is to overlock this seam. Now you get this, or not everybody gets this foot, but this is the overlock foot stitch number, foot number 2, and this is foot 2A. So 90% of the machines come with this foot. It's got a little bar on the back of the foot. Now when you are sewing, normally this is what we do. I'll just grab a scrap of fabric and show you. So normally when we're sewing, one moment please, I'll just get my thread through. This is what we normally do when we sew. We sew along, and when we're finished, we pull our thread to the side, okay? You cannot do that with this foot, and it's really important you know that, because I don't want you to break the bar on the underneath of the foot here. So I'm going to do the overlock stitch, and I'm going to tell it the correct foot, which is 2A. And the overlock stitch is usually after the zigzag on your sewing machine. So on my machine it's number 3, it might be number 4 on your sewing machine. So what it does, this machine, is it sets your width, your length, your needle position. But if I'm sewing now, and say I'm just going to put on straight sewing, say I sewed along and it's telling me I've got the wrong foot on, I'm going to break my needle because it's clever. If I sew along now, because I've moved my needle position over, and I lift my needle up and I pull my fabric that way or that way, actually it's not too bad because I'm pulling it to the left, but if you pulled it to the right, you would break the bar. So just be a little bit careful. So what I want you to do when you're using this is pull it to the back and then cut it, and then you've got no way of damaging it whether you pull it to the right or the left. We're trying to save the bar. So now I'm going to put it on the correct stitch. So what it does is it does about a 4.5 width and a 1.5 length. So I'm going to sit the bar on the raw edge of my fabric, and what it does is it does a couple of stitches here and then jumps over and does a zigzag, and a couple of stitches and jumps over and does a zigzag. So it is a really good stitch when you are sewing your garment by your machine and you're not using an overlocker. So I'm just cutting off that little bulky piece here. And what's interesting about this stitch is it does seem to sew quite slow, but that's because it's forming that stitch properly. So it's stitching over that bar. So it's never going to be as fast as an overlocker, but it's really good sometimes to make a garment all on the sewing machine. Yeah, it's quite different. It's quite fun. And after this, I'm going to show you how you join your ribbings together. So as you can see, it's definitely not as fast as whipping it down on an overlocker, but you can say the whole thing was sewn on your sewing machine. And if I could find where I put the zip this morning, I would show you how to sew the zip in. I have no idea where I put it, so maybe I'll show you the zips another time. I've got too much today anyway. There we are. But yeah, it's quite a neat idea. I'll have this at work. I'll take photos of the finished garment to show you. And I might even try and get the child to put it on so you can see it. It's definitely too big for her, but she thinks it's amazing. So that's all that matters really. And there you have your overlocked finish. It's really quite good. You can see it from there. So it's a nice finish, and that's completely finished off. Now, if I wanted to, I could turn that under and top stitch it, but it would be too bulky, so I'm just going to leave it. So once the zip is sewn down here, then I'll stretch this and it will be stitched like that. So that is why I've left that. Okay? Right, now I'm going to show you how you sew your ribbings together, because people always do these on the overlocker, and I don't want you to sew them on the overlocker anymore, because you get a much better finish if you sew them by sewing machine. So much flatter finish. So I'm just going to tell the machine what foot I've got on. There we go. Okay, so with ribbing, people are very confused which is the right and wrong side of ribbing, because they look really similar. But if you stretch your ribbing, it will roll to the right side. Okay? So the ribbing will roll to the right side. So I know this is the right side. So when I'm going to put my ribbing together, this is what people do. They put it together and then they go and whiz it up with the overlocker. And it ends up so bulky. So what I want you to do is just get a bit of fabric. So you've got a bit of fabric to start with. Because sewing on ribbing, what happens is it's knit fabric. And when you put your needle on the edge, it wants to go down and wants your machine to eat it for breakfast. So you're not going to do that. So you're just going to put that to hold it. You're going to start off by sewing on a piece of fabric. And then you're going to put this up to the needle. Okay? Now normally you do about 1/4 of an inch. So I'll move my needle position 1 click over, and I'm just doing a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, then you don't get any problem with your machine eating your fabric. And I always do all my ribbings all at the same time. So this is my tiny little cuff, so tiny. And come to the end and then join your next one on. And carry on. And that's how you sew your ribbings together. Now this is why you do it, okay? I'll show you right now. So you can imagine sewing, I've sewn, I think for the in between everything, I've sewn, I think this is the last pair of pajamas I've got left to finish. And that's 9 grandchildren. So here's my ribbing. So normally if this was a thick overlocked piece, I would have to fold it like that. So you end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of ribbing, and that's very, very thick. So by doing it this way, you open it up flat. I don't bother pressing it, I just open it up, and you've only got 2 pieces here. And when you fold it up, fold your right side to right side, you're only sewing through 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 8 pieces. And it sits so much flatter. So I think everybody should try that, because you will be amazed at how nice and flat that sits. Now this would be the back of my garment. So how I would mark it to sew it onto my garment is I lay this down, I get my raw edges together, and go like that, and I get my halfway mark, so that I do use a pin, and then I put my seam that I've sewn and my halfway mark together, and I get my quarter marking, I should have put a pin between those two, which I will. And then the other quarter marking, and I quarter my garment and I stretch them on. So if you're going to be doing it completely with a sewing machine, at this stage I do a very small zigzag to join them on, because you still want it to give, you don't use straight stitch. And I would stretch it between the two and a small zigzag and then the overlock stitch. So that is going on the bottom of that garment, and those are going to be for the sleeve. There you go, so that's that garment. Now I'll show you on here. So this is a non-woven pair of pajamas that I'm making for one of my grandies, and I have done this one on the overlocker. I am going to put a rib collar on. Now, instead of having it flat, I've decided to curve. Instead of having a square end, I've decided to curve an end. So this is a method I used to teach about 25 years ago. And so my ribbing was square and I've just curved it off. And what it does is it makes a nice soft covering, and they go over each other. So when the child puts it over their head, there's a little bit more room. I really like it, so I'm going to show you it, because I haven't done it forever, like taught it forever. So I've got my garment, and I've got my halfway mark, and I've got pins where my shoulder seam is. And I want to show you this because people get this wrong. They go halfway, quarter way. No way, it is not quarter way. Because when you do this and you put your halfway marks, you then put your halfway marks together and you walk your collar around. Oh, where did I put my pin? It's on the inside. Your neckline, you walk your neckline around, and your halfway mark is way over here because the front is lower than the back. So don't use your shoulder seams as your quarter marking, as I know some people have done and wondered why their ribbing doesn't fit. Okay, so quarter marking, halfway marking, that's what you need to have your garment prepared. Then I have measured round the neck and I've taken off 3 centimeters. I have curved my fabric, my wadding, my ribbing. Now I'm going to get my halfway mark of my ribbing. Goodness me, too many words. Halfway mark of my ribbing, and I'm going to put my wrong sides together like this. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be bringing this around, and it's going to overlap like 6 mils, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this together and get my quarter markings, but I've overlapped this by a little bit past my halfway mark so that I get my stretch right. Okay, so there's my quarter marking. You'll understand it when I sew it. Maybe not. And then I will get the same marking here. And this is a great way when you want a little bit more room in a neckband, especially if you're working with a really woven fabric and then this is really, really, really stretchy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my back. So this is my halfway mark to my back, take my pin out and put it through all my layers. So that's 1, 2, 3 layers because this is folded in half. I'm going to get my halfway, my other marking, and I'm going to pin it to pin to pin, and take my pin out and put through all 3 layers. For my last one, I'm going to fold this and I'm going to bring this raw edge here around, and I'm going to overlap it by 6 mils, and I'm going to put the pin in here. I know it looks strange, but I'm actually going to be stretching this on like that. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to the other side. I'm going to put my pin in here, and I'm going to take my pin out and I'm going to put that through to there. This one is now getting folded, and this is going to overlap just overlap past that one so that they're going to be sewn together, just like that. So you've got this cute little crisscross here, okay? I'm going to take the pin out and put it through all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, believe it or not, 5 layers, okay? I'm going to put my machine onto a small zigzag because I still want that to stretch. If I use a straight stitch, it might pop when the child brings it over their head. So I'm going to take it down, my zigzag, to about 1.8 and about 1.2. So that's going to be my stitch width and stitch length. I'm just going to hang those on there so I don't knock them off. Now, I'm going to be working with my stretch underneath my garment. The reason being, you always put your curviest bit or your stretchiest bit underneath. And I'm going to start from my centre back. Okay? So I'm just going to transfer my pin. And I'm going to lift my foot up. And I'm going to grab my thread. So my threads are out. And my other thread that I can't see. Oh, look, nearly lost it. Grab my thread. Always make sure you start with everything where you want it so you don't get any jam ups. Okay? So I'm going to start. I'm going to put my needle stop down. I'm going to move my needle position over because I've got a big foot on here. You wouldn't have such a wide foot on some of the machines. Move my needle position over so I'm doing like a 6 mil. And if you can see that there now, I'm just going to start sewing. Now my needle stop's going down, so I can now take my pin out and I can stretch it to my next pin marks. The next thing you want to do is make sure your raw edges are together. So if you can see that, I'm lifting up my raw edge of my garment and bringing it up to my ribbing. Okay? Taking out my pin. And then flattening out my garment so that everything's nice and even. Now when you get to here, you're going, oops, put it in the wrong place. When you get to here, you need to make sure that you keep your raw edge up to your ribbing. And round here, you are going to be joining it all together. So it's important that you get it right. So just do a little bit at a time. Stop. Use your scissors or your awl. Oh, where is my awl? I really like using my awl because it makes it easier to hold, but that's all right. I'll just use my scissors. And don't take the pin out till you have got your 2 pieces of fabric sewn together. Now you can take the pin out. And then make sure you've got all these edges together. Okay, all your edges together. Come up to there, do that little bit first. Now you can stretch the last bit. All right. Seam to the back. Oh, raw edges together. There we go. And then take your last pin out and then stretch it the last way. Now, I haven't got too much stretch in this because I know for a fact children hate things yanked over their heads, so I've made the neck quite big. Now, I have stitched my ribbing on, like so. Cut your threads. And remember, if you are using an overlocker, you could then overlock it. I like to sew this one first. When I've finished overlocking, I'm going to end up with this lovely little finish on my neck. And I must admit, this works for anybody's neckband. It's really, really nice. It's really, really easy. But if I was finishing this off on the sewing machine, I'd go back to my little foot that I've put somewhere safe, which is my 2A overlock foot, and I would tell the machine what foot I'm using, the 2A, and I would pick stitch number 3 and I would finish that off. Okay? And I would do it from the inside. And that just saves going to your overlocker or changing the colour of your thread. I think it's underrated People don't use their overlock stitch on their sewing machine enough, and it's so easy. It's just a bit slower. But you know, sometimes it's really practical to use your overlock stitch. You've got it, it's inbuilt on all the machines. When I get to a seam that's a bit messy, before I overlock it with my sewing machine, I actually trim it off, because your sewing machine doesn't have the ability to trim it off. So you do need to tidy it up before you do it, okay? But it's a really nice little finish. I've been twin needling the hem of the pajamas. Actually, I've got some I can show you finished. I have definitely been using up fabrics that I've had for 100 years. And my little 2-year-old has got some pajamas coming his way, and he's very excited because I got monster trucks on them. So there you have your little neckband. Now, if you like this part here, you can actually top stitch all the way around the outside edge with your edge stitch foot, and it gives a really nice finish. But it's a nice, cute little jammies. So I'll just quickly show you these, and I'll show you the twin needling. So I use twin needles on a lot of my clothing. But I've done twin needling on the hem of these monster truck jammies, and you get this beautiful channeling, which actually looks like you've piped them. So every fabric is different. I didn't want to put a tearaway or anything behind them. I wanted that finish, and I think it looks really cute. So yeah, it's a nice finish, and that's just the 4mm twin needle. Okay, moving on. Jammies, jammies, and jammies. Now, the next thing is, say you want to make yourself a pair of trousers or a pair of track pants, or children a pair of track pants, and you want them to be adjustable. Men's, we sell a lot of this for men. So we have this amazing elastic that we sell, and the elastic actually has a cord inside. So when you buy the length of elastic for your waist, you're actually getting 3 times the length of cord you need inside. It's crazy. It's just crazy. So what you do is, I'll just do it around me. So you measure around your waist, and you get it where it's comfortable, and that would be stretched on. You cut your elastic, and you would then think you would then put buttonholes and all of this nonsense, but actually what you do is you trim this off really evenly, and you trim this off really evenly, and you sew these together. Now this is really flat elastic, so I can sew these together without it being bulky, but I want to show you this because it's really, really, really clever. I do like to use this foot without the slit, don't I? So I'm just going to join this in a circle, and I'm just going to use a zigzag, and it's very soft, so you don't have to worry about any bulk. I'm going to cover that next to the bulk, and I'm going to tell it what foot I've got on, or else I get growled at. Cool. And I'm just going to do a little zigzag, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go across. And at this stage, you all think I've gone insane, but it's okay. And if you like, you can go through the middle. So it's very, very flat, this elastic. There's no bulk, okay? And if you are worried about that, you could get your fray check out, but it's pretty good. So why would I go and do that? Because now I've got to sew this on to my waistband. The reason why you do it is because when you go to sew this on to your waistband, you can do one of two things. You can sew the first stitch to hold it on and then just fold it down. And then you can stitch another row on this side of the casing, another row of this side of the casing, and top stitch on this side of the casing, all right? Or you can sew it on the right side of your garment. No, you can't. You can sew it on this side of the garment. So it's going to be folded like that. And then you'll be sewing it here and here, but when you turn it down, all you're going to see on your garment are the 2 rows of casing. So you need to do a little practice and decide which way you're wanting to do it. But I'm going to show you how you sew this into a garment. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the garment together. And I'm just going to do, this is a really, really simple pattern. So I'm just going to sew this seam and this seam and the legs, and then we've got a garment. So when we come back after the break, I'm going to show you 3 methods of sewing elastic. So the first things first, I'll just whip these together. And this is a really easy way of making anybody in your family some nice warm pants for winter. Probably wouldn't wear them out, but you know, they're really comfortable for when you're at home or in the garden. And I'm just going to do a straight stitch because there's not a lot of stretch in this. And I'll leave the white on so you can actually see. You do not need to overlock this fabric. It does not fray. It is polar fleece. All right, you do not need to. So you can't tell me it takes a long time to make pants, because they're the quickest thing you ever can make, especially with elastic. But the corded elastic is even better. So there's my back crutch and my front crutch, and now all you do is you sew your legs and you've got a pair of pants. Very, very quick, very, very easy. I don't even know what number child these ones are for. I have no idea. I think it is Miss 2-year-old. I don't know. Maybe. So there is my pants. And that won't be her elastic, will it? Oh, here's hers. So, back when we used to use this elastic, we used to then make 2 buttonholes, put the elastic in and thread the cord through the buttonholes. But now we don't do that at all. We just do what I showed you before. We just sew our elastic together. Very cool method. So just like I showed you, just overlap it and stitch down your square. It's very clever and very, very easy. And it just saves the hassle. So we get asked a lot for pajama cord elastic, pajama elastic, which we used to sell, which we can't get anymore. So the ladies that are repairing their husband's pajamas now, I tell them to put this elastic in, because it's lovely and soft and they can pull the cord up. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. So now you can decide which way you'd like to do it, but just make sure you know the back of your pants and the front of your pants. So what I do for the little ones, and for the mothers, is I put a bit of fabric in the back. So I'm going to show you after the break how to do that.